Hi, this is Zena Harris.
And I'm Mark Rabin.
Welcome to the tie-in.
We're going behind the scenes and talking about sustainability in action and the innovators making it happen.
We've been working in entertainment together for like 10 years now, and we've come across so many cool people doing amazing things.
Yeah, and this podcast is our way of capturing their voices and amplifying their work.
We hope you like it. This week, we're talking to Todd Lapp. He's a gaffer, and you and I met him probably 8 or so years ago. It's been a while, and I'm excited to talk to him. I'm excited to hear about what he's been doing, how he's been using battery power. That's how we all started working together in the early days, and, what he's interested in.
Totally. And he was one of the very early innovators to actually document and use systems in a variety of different locations and areas, and truly a trendsetter and innovator.
Yeah, let's dive in. We are here with Todd Lapp. And Todd, thank you for joining us for this podcast. This is a project that Mark and I have been working on for a little while. And we've been working in the sustainability space for, I don't know, about 10 years or so, specifically in film and TV. And we just hear so many stories out there as we're working with people. So this project is really to bring forth the voices of the people who are doing amazing things, innovating. And I know, we all met like about, I don't know, 8 or so years ago. You were one of the early adopters, I think, of clean tech, or tried it, and so you were there and knew about it for a long time. So we're happy to have you on.
Well, thanks so much for inviting me, and I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. So I just, will you please just describe your journey in filmmaking? Where did you start? What are you doing now? Just so we can get a sense of kind of, you know, what you're all about in this whole crazy world of filmmaking.
Sure. I mean, I started, I guess, really in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I knew some people in the industry who were fantastic and brought me on in a trainee position. And then that led to me working in Alberta for a little bit and on some TV shows there. And then I decided to make it a full-time career. It's part-time more in Alberta anyways, at that point in time at least. And so I decided to move down to the Lower Mainland and give it a shot and, just fell in love with the industry and really enjoyed my job and the dynamics that it took and all the challenges and, solving problems is a big thing for me. It what keeps things exciting, and this is the perfect industry if you like solving problems and working outdoors, working indoors. It's always a new environment, which is exciting.
Yeah. What position did you hold, or have you worked multiple positions?
Yeah, I've worked all the positions in.
As everybody does sometimes.
I worked in I've been a Gen Op, a board op, a best person, lamp op, set wireman. Uh, I was a rigging gaffer for a lot of years, and I've been a gaffer for about 11 years now. Uh, I I've I've run the whole gamut of things that I can do in my part of the category
Yeah.
for yeah.
Awesome. And when did you first come across sustainability in any way, shape, or form throughout that journey?
Well, ironically enough, I think that part of evolving in your career path has to be um, being open to new technology somewhat and taking the tools that you can utilize to be ahead of the curve. And for me, we were at that time we were filming a lot in mines and underground spaces. And when you're dealing with confined spaces, obviously you can't use anything that's combustible, and you can't. Sometimes the distances are such, or the shots are such, that you can't run um, a lot of cable, or due to line loss, all that kind of stuff, in these situations. And that's where we kind of met, I think, at that point, with the battery options, because I've always used battery options, but they were more, what we used to do is get two deep cycle batteries and put an inverter on it, and
Cat
then put it
batteries.
on and then put it on a cart or whatever, right? So then when it was emerging with the new technology, that this was all coming into one, and you could roll them around all together. It just was really, I was really interested in that aspect for certain situations. and that's kind of when I started moving towards that path for certain scenarios.
And you were one of the first gaffers and filmmakers to truly document the use cases of these units. And can you speak a little bit about that process? Because it's not evident. I mean, it definitely obviously took extra time and diligence, and you had your team, if I recall, on board as well. So can you speak to that?
Well, when we started the documentation, um, the initial documentation portion of that, we had a really great production manager and producer who were really forward thinking, and about environmental issues. I was, to be honest, I was using it as a tool. I wasn't really, the environmental issue obviously is a bonus for me, and to be able to show up at a location and not have any diesel smoke or something. I think it really puts a good face out from a promotional value for us as a filmmaking crew in certain circumstances. But for the documentation stuff, we were working on a show at that point that was the first Amazon series, and they really wanted to kind of put their best foot forward in all aspects, whether it be the cinematography or the storytelling, or whatever we could do to further an advancement in any way we could. Then the producers were behind it, so we were able to. And part of the documentation was an environmental protocol that was through Amazon and our producers and you folks, and we wanted to just see where the path was going, and where we had been, and if it is something feasible to do in the film industry at that point.
Yeah, I think that was what Man in High Castle. We were on that show. I remember we were all working together to try to figure out what to do with this new clean tech, and you guys were quite receptive. And you're right, the producer and the production manager, they were really behind, supportive behind us on doing this stuff. So I think that made a big difference. Do you think that kind of motivated you to as a crew member to, like, oh, wait a second, we have more options here, more tools? Do you think that helped?
Well, it helps immensely. And I find that it's really interesting because obviously we have a lot of shows that are from out of town, and a lot of production companies come to Vancouver. It's a beautiful place, and the lower mainland is a beautiful place to film. And we have a lot of producers that come, and when we're starting out at the start of the show, there's usually some sort of environmental or feasibility or impact statement that I get handed at the start,
Yeah.
to show, how many LEDs we're using. Are we using batteries? Are we being able to tie into grid systems? All this kind of stuff um, and it's really interesting because the networks will forward this to the production office, to me, and I'm more than happy to fill that out, because usually it's yes, 80%, no
Yeah.
problem, we got it. But what the problem is that a lot of times the accountants and the financial part of the film industry hasn't met with the environmental part. Like they haven't had coffee yet
Yeah.
and sit down to do it. So even though I think that we could use a lot more of this infrastructure, all this stuff is, incredibly expensive to build, incredibly expensive to maintain. I think it's a really positive tool in some instances, but it's a really hard selling point from my point, or from my position to try and sell this to local people that haven't or anyone that necessarily haven't used it. And when they ask, well, how come and why do we need this? Why do you think? And I can honestly tell them why or why not we shouldn't use it. But um, it's it's a hard sell with the producers, especially if you're on a lower budget show. you know, when you can just rent, you can go down to Home Depot and whatever, say for instance, and rent a little 2K portable generator and an engine. But for film and television, it's hard when there's sound. There's so many other costs that we're saving that are invisible,
Yeah.
like ADR, like the remixing of a track, because you have the only position that the city is allowing you to have a diesel generator is 50 feet away from a dialogue of a 4-page scene. Well, you're going to have ADR. So what's cheaper? Well, the X number of dollars that you're going to spend on an electric generator, you've just saved money and
Yeah.
also save time from maybe having to bring cast back in from LA with a flight. You're saving, so you might have to spend, say, just a number, say $2,000, but you're going to save $15,000. So I don't think that the whole vision, um, people don't see the full picture sometimes
Yeah.
about the true cost benefits of it. And sometimes, to be fair, when there's not a cost benefit, and if it's a moot point, then I don't use that technology. But sometimes, more often than not, I'll try and do something, especially if we're downtown, especially if we're in the public. I think it puts a really good face forward for our industry
Hmm.
when it's possible.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember, I think it was Man in the High Castle. You were using what, the towable trailer in Stanley Park in Vancouver.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
and it
you would
looked good.
yeah, you would hook me up with the prototype for the 13K.
Yeah. That.
And that was like, I know just where I'm going to use this, because you would just say, hey, do you want to try this as a prototype? And I'm like, sure, I'll take it out, and I know exactly where we're going to go. We're going to be at Stanley Park, right near the fountain, right in the middle of things. And I'm going to plop that thing right on set behind the director. And everyone's going to look at that, go, what's that? I'm like, don't worry about it. And they're going to be able to have their espresso machines running and their heaters and a couple of lights running all day and not even
Yeah.
know. That worked. And they were very, very happy. Yeah, no, it was definitely something new back then, 7 or 8 years ago. But even now, we have battery options that we're using on a daily. It's really changed. I'm working on a Fox series right now, and we're downtown all the time, and we're using batteries nonstop. I mean, we're with a different rental house, but we're trying to use as much of that infrastructure, because in this style of filmmaking that we're doing, you're able to do that. But it's story driven. If we were doing something um on film that you had to require a lot of lighting and a lot of heavy lights, all that kind of stuff, it might not be the best thing for that project. But for something that's more like the Born Identity style of thing or the Night Agent style of thing, you can be downtown in the day and whip around with those things and not have to cable and have infrastructure for blocks and blocks and blocks. You can be there with a smaller crew and get shots off that look good and tell the story and then move on. And for, I think, for the city of Vancouver too, when they see, instead of us taking over huge swaths of real estate, if we can come in there, shoot, and get it out of everyone's way, not have to have cable mats running all over the city. I mean, I saw some of a recent photo of a feature that's filming right now, and there's right across roads and stuff, and just to be able to do that and have that freedom is really a technology that's changed the landscape. I think we're going to see a lot more of it.
How are you charging? How are you finding recharging battery systems? Are you hybridizing with diesel generators? Are you plugging them into the kiosks? Are you going back at the end of the day?
Mhm.
Is there a process, and what are the limitations that you're finding with that technology?
Well, I'll send you a good photo after this. It's there's a good one of the many cows, the many calves getting milk from the mother cow
Is
Yeah,
that what
yeah,
it
yeah,
is?
yeah, exactly.
in between setups. So, um, to answer your question, all of it. Whenever we can, we'll take the generators um, back to the studio and charge it off the grid. That's option A. Option B is we'll take it back to a diesel generation plant and they can plug in, along the lines with all the other Teslas and Mustangs and all that kind of stuff and all the other cars that are charging off the same generator. So, um, if we're in a place, I mean, we can't really charge up the stuff that we're using from household stuff, and it's just not efficient. But when we go into, if we're out for a couple days and then when we get back to the studio, we wheel off the batteries and they have a little charging station that we've set up at our studio and they get plugged in.
Yeah.
Just, we're in the studio for a couple days. Oh, we're heading back out town. Great. We just uh we unplug them and we put them on the truck and off they go to do their job, right? So it's not too big of a deal. You just have to get in the cadence of it. And some people don't like the extra work, but it's not the extra work that you have to put in for charging it. It doesn't outweigh the amount of cable and infrastructure that you'd have to do without it, So in certain circumstances.
Yeah. So how you mentioned earlier, and I'm curious, I just want to kind of pick your brain a little bit on this. You mentioned kind of, the style of filmmaking changing over the years. So can you just describe what you're thinking there? How has it changed over the years?
Um, I think that a lot of it's changed a lot with gaming culture because a lot of the new directors and a lot of the people that are coming up, or even the viewership, they want to be able to take a camera and look in first person anywhere like you would in a video game.
Mm.
You know,
Okay.
there's no fourth wall. There used to be always a fourth wall in filmmaking was essentially would be the fourth wall for better versus the place that you didn't want to look, that you could put the infrastructure that what didn't have anything to do with story. But that's where work trucks would go. That's where, some lighting could go, or that's where some sort of basic infrastructure could go. And that's not part of your story. And then that's also saves an art department cost. You aren't dressing 360 in every location, all that kind of stuff. So a bunch of reasons why that we've kind of done that. And now a lot of times there is no fourth wall. They want to pick an environment and they want to shoot around. They want to film around every area that they see. So if you were an owl and you looked around, that's what they want to see. So
Yeah.
from an infrastructure standpoint, how do you do that? You can't. Everything has to be so mobile and so this doesn't work all the time. This is, if you're in a period piece and you wanted to use heavy lighting with inductive loads and you wanted to do massive amounts of firepower, it's grid transformers or diesel generation. That's it. I mean, that's right now, unless because when you're in the moment and you have an A-list actor, you're not going to wait to change out a battery, but that being said, if you're daytime downtown and you're running gun, you could still have that same A-list actor in the same shot, but you're doing more of like a Born Identity. I'm just using that movie to as a basis for that style of, seeing environments and being able to move quickly, in storyline at least. Mhm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned the lighting technology changing.
Mhm.
That's been a major contributing factor to being able to use battery systems as well. Are there any other technologies that you're using on set that have evolved over the last 10 years, and even including some of the lights that you're seeing that are exciting you, or that you've been tracking and using?
We have the opportunity to use a lot of LED lights for the majority of the things. there's some stuff that you can't really replace yet. The technology isn't there, or maybe even story wise. I mean, if I was doing say a period piece, say such as Man on the High Castle, I wouldn't necessarily use LED because the color and the feeling of the light is different, and the way it runs, like you're not running on oscillating waves, you're running on square waves, and it's just there's something to a feeling and a quality of it that you can't really, it's just like an artist, they wouldn't use a roller for everything. You just don't. It's just a tool. But for something that we use LED, I'd say for 90% of our setups now, especially on the show that I'm on right now, and that enables us to use batteries.
Mm-hmm.
What doesn't, the irony of it is that people's comfort has also went up. So they also want to have air conditioning and heaters on set nonstop. Sometimes I saw one director, they had a heater on one leg and an air conditioner on the other. And I'm like, are you the perfect temperature? Because I can give you a jacket. Take it on and off at your pleasure.
That's
So
great.
I know. So that stuff sucks the battery. Like no problem for lighting. And the irony of it is the majority of the infrastructure that we run now is for work trucks, heaters, air conditioners, catering. The stuff that we're using on set is battery driven for lighting. So it's kind of flip flop. We used to have film. You wouldn't have a lot of creature comforts, but you need big power for the lights for exposure. But now it's flipped. It's like you don't need any really, you're more shaping light with the grips and maybe augmenting a little bit with some LEDs possibly, and a battery. But then behind you, you have the diesel generation powering all the directors, heaters, and
Teslas and EVs.
yeah, and all the Teslas being charged. I know. So that's it's kind of a weird transitional stage that we're in right now. So
You mentioned earlier, I guess the you're into this, you really like film and TV because of the ability to problem solve. What are some like interesting things you've been problem solving for recently that you could share with us?
well, I mean, this is one of the first union shows that came back in Vancouver after the strike ended. We started filming in December, so that was actually quite early for coming back from all the time off that everyone had there.
Mm-hmm.
And what we have to be cognizant of, and it's always on our mind, is of course costs. And when you go into a large space that say the director or the story loves, and you have to figure out how to light the space. Say if you're in a large area, we were recently at a great location. It was at BCIT, but it's a huge uh, building. I think that we were one of the first peoples to film there actually, but it was all glass, it's all windows, so much ambient light. And I knew that during the course of filming that it was a day scene, but we'd be losing the light all day and
Yeah.
transitioning into night, but it had to look like the same scene.
Yeah.
So technically, I know it has to happen, but financially, it's sometimes a heartbreak to kind of tell the producers that you have to augment this during the day so that in the edit, the story remains the same. Because people don't necessarily know the reasons behind why something looks like a mistake, but that they can tell on a subconscious level that it's a mistake. And if you're editing, it's just the same thing. If we were editing and we were over the course of a couple of hours, my face was brightly lit and all of a sudden it was dark,
Mm-hmm.
and you were cutting in between those two. As a viewer, it would kind of throw you out of the story. Like, well, why all? Is there an eclipse? Is there a spaceship overhead? Like you're like on a subconscious level, humans wanting to know about stories, they would search for those answers and maybe bring you out of the story that is written. So
Mm-hmm.
you have to be able to have some sort of continuity. And sometimes it works. Like sometimes you can be in a location for an hour and you can do it. Sometimes that location has stunts in it, or sometimes it's at a time of day that the actor is available only for that time of day, which is going to be at, say, at sunset. you have to have the equipment and the tools to be able to transition and make it seem like it's the same time of day. And that is probably my kind of like a day-to-day challenge for me for problem solving is trying to figure out a solution um, in a financially feasible way, um, so that we can still have a great looking show, but also still make the producers look good, and they know what they're doing as well. Because everyone at the end of the day wants to look good. I want to look good because the show looks good. I want to make my boss look good so that he or she gets rehired. And I want to make the producers look good, showing the networks that they hired the right people for the job. We all want to look good.
Yeah.
And so I can't be frivolous with the decisions, and that whole streaming thought process is really um, exciting to me because it's a nonstop challenge, and there's never a day or a moment where I'm not thinking about that kind of stuff. So really, it's a right brain, left brain type of job, and a right brain and left brain type of industry. Because directors, trust me, directors aren't thinking just about story and being creative. They're thinking about costs. They're thinking about, because it all has to do with cost, right? If
Yeah.
you make a great product, and have people come back and view that product, and you can make it on a budget that everyone's happy with, that show will go on.
Yeah.
Everyone will have work. Everyone will be able to pay their mortgage. Everyone will be able to put the bread in the oven at the end of the day. And and new technology is a way to do that, because our setup times, we used to do a lighting setup. We used to take between, I'm going to say, 5 minutes and 2 hours, depending on the complexity of it, all that kind of stuff. Now, on certain shows, on this show, the lighting setups are, by the time they finish blocking, we're lit, because I have all the control. It's right with me. It's it's I'm seeing the blocking in real time, and we're making adjustments right there. So you can save so much time on the floor. And even a battery's a good example. It's just last week we're like, okay, we're looking this way. We weren't supposed to look this way. It's our fourth wall. We weren't supposed to look that way. Okay, I moved the battery. Let's roll. You know,
Yeah.
it's not pick up all the cable. It's not pick up all the infrastructure. It's not pick up this. It's like move the light, and and
Yeah.
move the battery, and let's roll.
So
And
what
I
I've
bet that
always
also, oh, I,
I was just gonna say, sorry, Zena.
that's
Um,
it.
we always say it either has to save time and money or do something creatively that you otherwise weren't able to do. I just wanted to touch base quickly on one thing that you had mentioned earlier about a lot of underground shots, or even on a barge, for example, right?
Mhm.
Things like that. You had mentioned that one of the first real aha moments I recall was the Britannia mines, or underground shot you did for Man in the High Castle.
Mhm.
And you had said, okay, I need everything you guys got. Let's go, right? Can you just color that for a little like moment, and about how that went, and then with that aha moment, um, just for the audience here to get a little visual of what that process looks like.
Yeah, because I think people are trying, like you said, some get it, some don't. And I feel like
Mhm.
hearing about how you kind of understood it will probably help others kind of get their thoughts together on it too.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think that as a human, everything I interact with on a daily basis, I feel, can I put that in my toolbox, or no? So whether it be painting or art or tools or hardware or software or firmware or anything, I'm always on the lookout to, like, okay, can I use this or no? So when we walked into the middle of a giant mine shaft that took, maybe 7 minutes to walk to the middle of, and then we're looking both ways, and okay, we're gonna look all this way, and we're gonna be up and down the shaft, and then we're gonna spin around and look this way. I thought, well, if we're ever going to do this in a timely fashion, we can't lay out infrastructure in here, because in that particular mine that we were in, we weren't able to dig, because you don't necessarily dig in a mine if that's what miners do, and there could be consequences of digging in a place where you don't want to dig. Not There's also chemicals. There's this one. There's copper. and which can be toxic at higher levels. So there's a whole bunch of stuff. But what they did have, which most mines do, is they have a track. They have a track to take out all the ore. And on that track was train cars. And on those train cars, you could push them. And I thought, well, I'm going to put a bunch of batteries on this train car, and I'm going to push this train car back and forth behind us. So when we film one way, the train car full of power will be right there. Then when we turn around, I'm going to move the train car a little bit and look the other way. And that's it. Of course, we had other stuff augmenting at the other sides of the mines, which were from diesel generation, all that kind of stuff. But for what we needed in the mine, the batteries were the perfect solution, and they worked to treat for sure. And we were just on barges you said barges. We were just on barges last week. We did a week of barges, all on battery. And then we did another 2 units going off and shooting a whole bunch of stuff with batteries. And we did the whole thing, the whole set. And then we went down onto a dock, and all we used was batteries. So there was no diesel. The only diesel generation that we used was for work trucks and craft service and the circus, which of course have heaters and air conditioning, all that kind of stuff. And they have to run for 14 hours a day. But for all the set is all batteries.
Well, just kind of thinking like all of these tools that you have, kind of thinking through what can work, what can't. Filmmaking is changing. You've seen it. If you were to kind of write a new playbook, if you will, if you were to come up with a couple of key points you'd want to see on, in this kind of next gen, if you will, way of filmmaking, what would they be?
Like guiding principles.
Yeah.
Well, if cost was something that you were thinking about, I'd say
It could be anything. Yeah. If cost wasn't an issue, what would you do?
well, the main thing for me is consistency of power, because no one wants power to go down ever. And as a society, we've become so useful to have on demand regulated, I remember on another show I did a number of years ago. I mean, we were filming at the top of a mountain, and I could see the producer had arrived at the top of the mountain, and he had in one hand he had his cell phone, and the other he had his charger, and I could see him kind of spying around like like The Sound of Music, like the realization, thinking, oh, I'm on the top of a mountain. Where am I going to charge this? Like, you could see in his eyes, like, oh. And then I took my hand and I shoved it into a shrub, and I rustled in the shrub, and I pulled out a power box. And he was like, whoa, like, where did you get that? And I was just like, this is what we do. We supply you power. You don't have to worry about how it gets there or what it does, but my crew and I, this is what we do to make sure that you can plug in your cell phone on the top of a mountain. Because you never know, he might have a dinner reservation or something, or she might have a dinner reservation that's important or something. But I don't know what producers do, but I know that they need to charge their phones constantly. And I'm just joking, but I think that going forward as a technology, what I'm really liking is I like the self-mobile batteries. I think that we use those a lot. There's the 20K ones, the 10K batteries. I think that filming downtown, we're going to get to a point where we really have to have the battery technology on point. And right now, there's a lot of locations that are even coming to our locations department and saying, you can film here if you use a battery. If you have it's just easy to sell to the tenants. If there's a second floor, you're on the second floor, there's apartments, you don't want to have exhaust up there. And I agree with that as well. I mean, I wouldn't want that either. And you can do that with a little bit of planning and a little bit of thought, I think. And what I want to go forward with technologies, however filmmaking evolves, is that I just want to keep doing it. So I want to evolve, and I want to do whatever I have to do to make sure that filmmakers look good, that Vancouver looks great, that BC looks great. When people come here from other parts of the world, that they go, oh, wow. Like, they know what they're doing. So maybe we should come back.
With a low footprint.
With a low footprint.
And a high yield and high product.
Yeah, and just, I always tell my crew is we're exactly like a restaurant, like if you go to a restaurant and the food is good and the and the and the bill is on point and the service is great, guess what? You're gonna go back.
You'll
If
tell
you
your
go back
friends.
there, you have a lot of attitude and a bunch of crappy servers and the food isn't that great? Why go back? Humans are super simple in that manner. Just be a service industry, which we are here,
Mhm.
and make people happy and having a small footprint, making the city happy, making people happy, and still people get to do great work and have their cappuccino while they're on set. Hey, win-win-win in my mind.
Totally.
I love it.
Totally. I love it. I love it. You kind of brought it all together right there. Thank you.
Yeah,
You're
Thanks.
thanks,
welcome.
Todd.
Mark, do you have any other questions? I think
No, I
this
mean
has been a
this has been
great
great. Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah, I really love it. It's we always look at you as one of the very early adopters in the industry, and it's amazing to hear how far you've taken it and where you've taken it. And we know that the work that you seeded has been referenced around the world as well. So I
Oh,
mean,
thank
it's
you.
exciting to see what's happening in the UK, in LA, in New York, and Toronto, and everywhere. We were just in St. John's, Newfoundland,
Oh, fun.
presenting in clean energy and saying, look, this is a big opportunity to take a
Yep.
leadership role in this. And it's still early, right? It's still early days. We're still figuring it out. But there's a
Hmm.
lot of great leaders out there who have, paved the way.
Sure. Well, it's
Yeah.
important. It's important to do that because if to those communities, they don't maybe understand that filmmaking can happen anywhere. And when a producer, a production company, or a storyteller comes to, say, Newfoundland and says, "Hey, I want to film here," but they were just in Vancouver and we had this great experience where we were able to do things that we weren't able to do because we could move infrastructure so quickly. That's a big selling point. So if they don't get on that, then they're just going to be left behind and they'll go somewhere else, is what
Yeah.
the the fact is.
Brilliant.
Yeah. It's a great point. It's a great point. Thank you. Thank you for all your work. Thank you for taking a chance on these tools and for all that you do.
Happy to help, and just reach out if you ever want to come out to set, and if you're in or
Yeah.
if you're downtown, if you want to have a little set visit, and we're downtown a lot on this show, so I'm sure you'll be able to see some stuff in action for sure.
Thank you, Todd Lapp. And
Thank you so much.
we look forward to following you in the future.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
Wow, that was quite the interview. He's a real pioneer and an early adopter, and it's really beautiful to see how he's taken the early technology and evolved with it over the last 8 years or so. It really mirrors the adoption and proliferation throughout the film production industry.
Yeah, I know. And like I just really appreciate his honesty and kind of almost just raw account of what he does, what he thinks about, how he problem solves. That comes up a lot in conversations that we have. We need to be problem solving, we're problem solvers, all of that.
Mhm.
And it was just really neat to hear his take on it.
Yeah, it's a true behind the scenes account of how he's made this happen, and also how he's found like opportunities for this technology that are basically non-negotiable at this point and have become standard now in production. So super interesting. Definitely a bit more of a technical conversation for those film nerds out there, but really something special. I'm sure he's got so many more stories in there. I mean,
Oh my
things that he
gosh.
must see and do every day. I mean, it's wild.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I love having these conversations because you just never know what's going to come up. And yeah, just appreciate hearing from him and his perspective and hope you all did too.
Yeah, great. All right. Well, thanks everybody, and thanks for listening. And until next time.
See you later.
Hey, listeners. If you have a story about innovation and sustainability in entertainment, please get in touch with us at tieinpodcast@gmail.com. That's TIEIN tieinpodcast, all one word, at gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. We may ask you to be a guest on the show. Our designer is Aaliyah Kane. Music is by Peter Chapman. Our producer is Colin Miller.